Hello dear chess friends from International Chess School. Today I will show you a game which will be a support lesson for the theoretical article calculation. With the help of this game played in April 2011 at the Chinese Championship, I will show you how it is supposed to calculate during the game, and how will you choose the candidate moves, and how you will use the criteria expressed in the theoretical lesson. The game started as Semislav. We have an international master, Zhang Ziyang, with the white pieces, and a grandmaster, Li Chao, rated 2632 with the black pieces. I will pass quickly through the opening because the interesting events arise around the 15th move. d5, c4, c6, knight f3, knight f6, e3. It is a quiet but full of venom line. g6, knight c3, bishop g7, bishop e2. Now black can exchange the pawns on c4 as the light square bishop already moved once, and white will be forced to lose another tempo moving the light square bishops. Short castle, d takes c4, bishop takes c4, knight bd7. White has a better pawn structure in the center, but it is pretty difficult to push e4, as the d4 pawn is aimed by the bishop and the queen from d8. b3, knight b6, threatening to take the pair of bishops, bishop e2, knight fd5. Till here all the moves have been played on strategical grounds. Now black offers a knight's exchange, and with his last move it activates the powerful bishop from g7, of course taking the long diagonal under control, h8, a1. Knight takes d5, knight takes d5. Now black is threatening to take the pair of bishops again with the knight c3. Of course bishop b2 is not the best option, as the bishop will be unprotected on b2. This is why white preferred the bishop d2. Black could have played the bishop f5 in order to keep control over the central square, e4, and to prepare a quiet maneuver based on a5, a4, to use his space superiority on the queen side. Instead black played bishop g4, h3, bishop takes f3, bishop takes, and black played c5 here, attacking the d4 pawn. As you noticed, black was the active side in this game, but this doesn't matter you should assess the position and find the best way to continue. From strategical maneuvers, suddenly we have a tactical issue here. In this example, we will see how important is to accurately calculate the first moves of each variation and to consider the best candidate moves. And at the same time, it is important to look for your opponent candidate moves. Don't neglect especially forcing moves, captures, check, attacking moves. It is important to insert intermediate move when it is possible. And not in the last place, to be aware of your weaknesses, especially the king's position, which plays a crucial role. Even if you are attacking, like black is in this case, he must not forget how vulnerable the king will become in the absence of the dark square's bishop. Now, white is confronted with a simple decision. He has to choose between rook c1, which leads to a balanced position after c takes d4, e takes d4, e6, or he can sacrifice the exchange. He will get immediately one pawn in return, but on the long term, the dark squares around the black king will be weak. So again, we can talk here about a strategical decision, mostly. D takes c5, bishop takes a1, queen takes a1. Black hoped that he will manage to defend the dark squares, and in the view of the open files C and D, he believed that he can quickly activate the rooks along these files. Knight f6, bishop c3, queen c7. Each side, it's mobilizing the pieces. Of course, bishop takes f6 can be calculated here as a candidate move, but it is obvious that the dark square's bishop is clearly superior to the knight from f6. b4, knight d7, rook c1, rook fd8. Till here are normal moves which doesn't require a precise calculation. I will insist on the critical moments where precise reckoning of the variation is needed. h4, a wise decision. White brings fresh forces into the battle and wants to demolish black's pawn structure from the king side. Rook ac8, h5. Black was afraid of h6. I cannot say if he really calculated this, or he simply wanted to exchange one of the attackers. G takes h5, bishop takes h5. Now both bishops are attacking. The bishop from h5 started to play an important role. a5, a3, 8 takes b4, 8 takes b4, knight f8. The knight is ready to came on g6, from where it will protect the h8 square against the maneuver bishop h8 and queen g7 after that, and at the same time the knight from g6 can support e7, e5 in order to restrict white's activity on dark squares. Queen a2, white changed the diagonal. At the same time he can approach along the second rank from the king side. Knight g6, queen c4. An interesting way to support the queen side pawn majority, and at the same time white is ready to create the dangerous battery queen plus bishop after bishop b2 and queen c3 with pressure on a1 h8 diagonal. b6, bishop g4, e6, bishop f6, threatening the rook, using the consequence of black last move e7, e6. It is the first step that you should use when you are starting to consider the candidate moves. In this case, white fulfilled two criteria. He used the consequence of the opponent's last move and at the same time improved the position of bishop f6. It is the moment here for white to consider all the possibilities to mate with the bishop from f6, and he has to imagine the paths that the white queen can take in order to be brought on g7. For example, even if they are not possible for the moment, queen f4, queen h6, or queen h4, queen h6, or queen g5, if the knight will disappear from g6. Queen h6 is preferable because it cuts the f8 square, the escape square for the black king. Rook d5. Here is the first critical moment of the game. The first question that came into white's mind is, which is the threat behind black's last move? Black is threatening to grab the c5 pawn. And in such situations you can use an acronym to find the best moves, or to find the candidate moves. First we have to see that we can capture C. From capture, if we can capture a piece from the same value, a pawn in this case, then we have to consider if we can interpose something between the attacked piece and the attacker. In this case, it is not possible. Then we must consider to move the attacked piece. In our case, the pawn from c5. And in the last place, we have to see that we have to see if it's possible to attack a higher valued piece from the opponent's camp, or to defend it. So we can remember C from capture, E from interposing, M from moving, A from attacking a higher value piece, or D from defense. So in this case, we can move the pawn with the c5, c6, or we can attack a valuable piece, the rook from d5, which is unstable, and at the same time we will remove one of the attackers, because the rook from d5 is attacking our vulnerable pawn from c5. So these are the important moves that we have to consider. Of course, in this category, also bishop f3 can be considered to attack the rook from d5. I believe that c6 was a good idea, but usually a single advantage, like it is the complex of weak dark squares around the black king, is not enough for the win. In this case, white has to create a second advantage, the free pawn from c6, and to combine the direct attack against the black king with the promotion threat connected with the c6 pawn. And if you can avoid complication, try to do this way. This is a simple move which can succeed, for example, after rook a8, bishop f3, rook f5, bishop b2, preparing to create the battery along a1 h8 diagonal, knight e5, bishop takes e5, rook takes e5, rook d1. The most important thing in this case is that the black queen is tucked in front of the c6 pawn, which means that white has better pieces flexibility with his other pieces. He's threatening rook d7 followed by queen f4 with a terrible attack against the exposed pawn from f7. For example, rook f5, queen c3. The point of queen c3 is that the rook can leave for the moment the first rank due to the threat rook a1. So queen c3 is meant to defend the first rank, as h2 is controlled by the queen from c7. Rook e8, rook d7, queen c8, bishop g4, rook g5, and queen f6. You have to imagine this position when you are pushing c6. It is not so difficult. I will show you one more time this position, and you have to imagine a way to deflect the rook from d5, then to penetrate with the rook on d7 and to aim the f7 pawn. First you have to imagine the winning position and then to find the moves to reach it. It is very important. Let's return to this position. Bishop f3 was also preferable. In such cases when you have sensitive equal candidate moves, try to pick up the most flexible one, and bishop f3 is a flexible move. It can support c5, c6. It attacks the rook from d5, and at the same time the bishop can be repositioned on b1, h7 diagonal. The third move, e4, which was played by white in the game, is not bad, but it has a drawback, a consequence. The f4 square will be weak, and in conjunction with black's idea rook d2, it may provide counterplay for black. So you should pay attention also to the opponent's ideas in the process of calculation. Don't forget that your opponent is there and he wants to mate you as well. Of course, black played rook d2. Threatening queen f4. Now we can find the best move, just figuring out which is black's threat, queen f4, so g3 is compulsory. And black played b takes c5. Since white didn't push c5, c6, black tries to remove this threat. He took the chance and he wanted to remove the c5 pawn. I don't know if he noticed white's tactical blow, the next tactical blow or not, or he wanted to provoke it. But the outcome of the game proved that black was right. Now it is another important moment for calculation. White can simply take b takes c5. This should be the first candidate move. And then with a fresh eye we have to look at the consequences of black's last dangerous move, rook d2, which left the rook from d2 unprotected. And white noticed this, and he imagined that the rook from d2 will be vulnerable to a move like bishop g5. In order to create a double attack, or to use the unprotected position of a piece, you should calculate the forcing moves, which are captures, checks, attack of the pieces. One of these moves is bishop takes e6, which was played in the game. I believe that bishop takes e6 can wait. Objectively speaking, it is the best move, but it creates a very unbalanced position where black has his chance also. The quiet approach was b takes c5, rook a8, c6 using the free pawn, rook 8 a2, doubling the rooks and attacking f2, bishop d4, white's to-do list consists in defending f2, and then with the bishop from e3, at some point white can attack the queen from c7 with bishop f4. Rook a3 against it. If white plays bishop e3 now, it will be a blunder because black will take on e3, and after f takes e3, queen takes g3 will prove to be lethal. e5, closing the diagonal, rook a2 back. Now if we try to find the best move, we should see that bishop from g4 is out of play, so bishop f3 improving the worst placed piece, king g7, bishop e4 centralizing the second bishop. Even if the bishops are pieces with long range of action, they are placed best in the middle. h5, bishop takes g6, king takes g6, bishop e3, rook e2, and queen f4. As long as the black queen is tucked in front of the pawn, white will manage to create local PC superiority on the king side, where the black queen can't participate in defense. So b takes c5 for white was simple and effective. But white's idea to look for intermediate moves, it's okay. It is important to insert intermediate moves at the beginning of the variations, first or the second move of the variation, and try to use the undefended or unstable pieces of your opponent. But not in the last place, when you enter in tactical lines, you have to be mentally prepared for the changes in the character of the position. Suddenly, for a dynamic strategical approach, a very intense struggle will arise on the board. White took on e6. Bishop takes e6. He calculated the critical line, f takes e6, where after queen takes e6, queen f7 doesn't work because of queen takes c8. It is check rook at this moment. King f8 and bishop g5 with a terrible double threat, bishop h6 and bishop takes d2. Actually, white will be 3 pawns up after he managed to grab the rook from d2 in case of king g7, for example. But bishop takes e6 has only one minor threat here, to take the exchange. The problem is that we will enter into a very dynamic play. Actually, white won't have time to take the c5 pawn back. So white's threat is to take the c8, the exchange on c8. Rook f8 was played, and now is the most important moment of the game. Now it is the time to calculate moves and to use the criteria recommended under theoretical lesson. As try to see the consequences of your opponent's last move. He threatens to take on e6 and to attack the f6 bishop as well. The drawback is that the queen will be unprotected and pinned, which may suggest that at the next move the queen will get rid of that pin, and black will try to activate the queen. You should not forget this. A drawback of this variation chosen by white is that he cannot use the knowledge gathered before when he calculated lines. Suddenly we have a different position on the board. Try to avoid complication is another piece of advice. And the most important thing is that you should not forget that black has a rook on second rank, which attacks f2, and the light squares are weak because of the push g2, g3. So white has to save the bishop from d5, and he has to compare the variations bishop f5, bishop g4, any retreat on h3 c8 diagonal with bishop d5. And considering that the black queen should move, he should have chosen bishop f5. It was compulsory. He played bishop d5. Let's take a look at bishop f5 and the short line that he has to recon. Queen d6, bishop c3, c takes b4, queen takes b4, rook d1, rook takes d1, queen takes d1, and king g2. White keeps the upper hand thanks to the exposed position of the black king, but his main asset, the free queenside pawn, has vanished. He still has good chances based on the attack on the dark squares. Instead, he neglected the possibility of retreating the bishop on h3 c8 diagonal, and he played bishop d5. A serious mistake, and I suppose actually that he didn't calculate at all. Maybe it was time trouble. It is already the move 32. Now black used the consequence of white's last move. Bishop from f6 is unprotected. The pawn from f2 is vulnerable, so black's piece, which is able to deliver a double attack on f2 and f6, is the queen. From where? From f4. For this reason he played knight f4. An amazing counterplay. Not only that the knight can be taken, for example, first line that deserved to be calculated by white, g takes f4, queen takes f4, queen takes e5, queen takes f6, rook c3 threatening rook g3, and h6 creating safe home on h7 for the king. Please notice how important will be, even in this case, the bishop on f5. The bishop on f5 will control h7, and this variation will no longer be possible. In this case, white can continue with the rook g3, but after king h7, white doesn't have time to take the rook from f8 because of queen takes f2, followed by mate on h2. Actually, the queen from c5 is overburdened. It has to defend f2 and to attack the rook from f8 as well. So let's go back to knight f4. White has to calculate first the critical line, g takes f4, and then to see if he can use the acronym mentioned before: capture, interpose, move, attack, or defend. For this reason, he has to consider the threat knight h3 followed by rook takes f2. So rook f1 comes to his mind, and he can also recon a variation like bishop c3, where the main drawback is that the bishop will be interfered between the queen and the rook, which means that the rook from c1 will be undefended and vulnerable to a double attack delivered by the black queen. Knight h3, king g2, rook takes f2, king takes h3, queen d7 check, king h4, rook h2, king g5, queen d6, and in order to escape from mate, white has to play e5, queen g6 check, king f4, rook f2, even queen h6 check rook will be winning, bishop f3, and queen h6 winning the rook and the game. So the threat knight h3 is really dangerous, and white has to discard. This is another important step when you choose between different candidate moves, to develop a sense of discarding the W's and bad variations. Rook f1, and now a critical moment for black arises on the game. I will flip the board. Now you can see the position from black's point of view. He suddenly gets some counterplay, And white defended against knight h3 and rook f2, and black has to figure it out what to do next. In order to leave the knight on f4 for one more move, black has to consider the following moves. Queen c8, with the idea of queen h3, and if white takes on f4, queen g4 followed by a perpetual check on light squares. With the same for the same reason, black can calculate queen d7, and not in the last place, he may calculate knight d5, knight takes d5. Let's see, knight takes d5. Let's consider knight takes d5 first, and then we will see the similar variations, queen c8 and queen d7. Knight takes d5, e takes d5, queen d7, defending against the terrible threat queen g4, and attacking the d5 pawn. Actually, black threatens to grab the pawn at the next move. b takes e5, queen f5, chasing the bishop. If queen h4 now, rook takes d5. Bishop e7, rook b8, d6, and rook 8, b2, with a dynamic balance. The pawn from f2 is hanging, and white doesn't have the time to push both c6 and d7. Probably he would go for a perpetual check, starting with queen a6, queen a8, or queen c8. Queen c8 doesn't work, so queen a6, queen a8. A second line, instead of knight takes d5, is queen d7. Noticing that queen c8 and queen d7 serve the same idea, I would prefer queen d7 because it exerts pressure on d5. Now b5 will lose because of knight takes d5, e takes d5, rook takes d5, and black is an exchange up, and white doesn't have time for the maneuver queen h4, queen h6. It requires two moves, and black will defend at his turn also in two moves, queen f5, queen g6. So after g takes f4, queen d7, g takes f4, queen g4, king h1, queen f3 check, king g1, and queen g4 with a perpetual check. This was a reasonable outcome for this game. Instead, black played knight e2. When calculating variation, knight e2 has to be rejected, as it interposes the knight on the second rank, and the black queen remain on the dark squares. It is absolutely necessary for black to take the light squares under control with the queen. The attack on dark squares, where the white king is well protected, doesn't succeed. The weaknesses around the white king are on light squares. But black played knight e2 check. White played king g2. I will flip the board back. Now white has the upper hand again. Black didn't manage to unpin the queen, so white still has time to take the c5 pawn. And here black continued to go wrong, in the wrong direction. Maybe it was a time trouble. He played knight g3. It is a good looking move. It threatens f1, so it is not so weak, but it doesn't defend the black king, which is exposed along the g file. Only one queen check along the g file, and the king will be mated. So white has the moment to push e5 here with a double threat. King takes g3, or queen g4 followed by mate on g7. Queen g4, queen g7 mate. Now black launched the last firework. Queen d7, and in this position we can practice the variation calculation at his best. You can pause the video and try to figure it out, the position, for 10 minutes by your own, and try to write down the candidate moves with variations. In such positions, calculating over short distance accurately of the first important moves for you and for your opponent is more important than the ability to calculate long variations. So you should search for the best candidate moves, and don't calculate long variations. Short but accurate. If in a position, after some thought, you didn't find a variation with a clear result, or you are unable to assess the position at the end of the line, go back and look for other candidate moves. It must be something in the position that requires double checking, or simply close your eyes and see the position with the fresh eye, and try to focus on your trumps. And white's trump in this position is the bishop from f6. If white have imagined earlier the mate positions with the queen on g7, and he has imagined the ways for the white queen to penetrate on g7, he would have realized here that he has the chance to go queen f4, and from f4 the queen has two possibilities: queen h6 or queen g5, in order to penetrate on g7. As I already mentioned, queen h6 is the forcing move, as it cuts also the king's escape with king f8. So here white has to trust this idea with queen f4, queen g5, queen h6, especially because if black tries to defend with the queen, to install the queen on g6, the rook from d2 will be hanging in case of queen f4. So the candidate moves in this position should be queen f4, queen h4, with the same idea to go queen g5 or queen h6, and the king takes g3. We cannot neglect this simple move, because the bishop from d5 is untouchable. If queen takes d5, then simply queen g4. The black queen is overburdened. It has to defend g4 and to attack on d5, which is not possible. Actually, all these three moves are winning. Simple moves. And this is how you should start calculating moves. Look at the consequences of the opponent's play, which left two exposed pieces, the knight from g3 and the rook from d2, and try to connect the queen with the powerful bishop from f6. So, if queen f4, queen takes d5, king takes g3, queen d3, king h2. Now another threat arises, rook g1 check. Even if after queen g6 white missed the possibility of rook g1, he should have seen that the rook from d2 is hanging, so is winning. The other variation, queen h4. Again, queen takes d5, king g3. Of course, rook d3 check will fall into the same trap. King h2 followed by rook g1. Rook a8, trying to take a hike with the king. King f8, king e8, followed by queen h6, and again the mate is unstoppable. Queen d3 check, king h2, and after queen g6, queen d2 is the best here, because rook g1 will be met by rook takes f2. So queen takes d2 with winning position. There's no perpetual check, as after king g3, queen h5, king g3, rook a3 check, f3. The checks are over. Queen g6 will be simply met by king f2 followed by rook g1. It is not difficult to calculate such variations after you defined your objectives. It is important to define your objectives in this case, and this is the mate on g7. The third possibility, king g3. It is also good. Now rook takes d5 doesn't work. Rook takes d5, then queen f4 will follow, and then subsequently queen g5. So rook d4 is the only move. And now white has to figure it out, another path for the queen, and to take into account that the g4 square is undefended here. Queen e2, queen takes d5, queen h5, and again black is helpless against the threat rook g1 and king h2. For example, queen e4, rook g1, queen g6 check, and a beautiful stroke, king h2, winning. Instead, white was lazy, calculating variations. Maybe he was in time trouble, but even here you have to look for the forcing moves, and don't forget about your weaknesses. White did this twice when he chose the candidate move. First one when he played bishop d5, a good looking move, and he allowed knight f4, and now he played bishop f3, the same bishop. He didn't found the move with maximum impact, and simply retreat the bishop. The game is lost now, as white doesn't threat anything. Black had the time to take the rook. Now the threats rook f1, g1 have vanished. Queen f4, the last shot, but this can be met in two ways. Even queen f5, queen takes f5, knight e3 will win due to the pin along the second rank, or as white demonstrated in the game, queen d3, being ready to answer queen g5 with queen g6. So white resigned here. It was a game full of lessons. Try to analyze it, like I said, on your own, and to see if the candidate moves chosen by you are correct, and use this lecture in addition with the calculation theoretical article from Mount 3. Till